Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So earlier today I released a video basically highlighting the main strategies and the main abilities that we will need to be aware of for Battlegrounds Season 4 victory track meta and also week 1 meta as it coincides. And in this video we're going to be going over more specifically about the likely champions that you do want to pay attention because they are exceptional at some of the things that matter, and I will try to highlight them. Before we go and move any further, I highlighted 4 base abilities that will be important, as in power burn immunity, armor breaks, nullify and neutralize, and ability accuracy reduction. There is another 5th thing that can work and is quite important, and that primarily will be visible in these 2 characters with Kitty Pryde and Namor, which is going to be basically ignore the power burn damage or reflect the power burn damage. Now that I have that put aside, kind of covered, let's go over some of the champions that I personally think, will be more visible than before. Obviously, not all of these champions are going to get used, but all of them do have some abilities that can work if you are going to put them in your decks. So we're going to start with the flat out most important thing, which is power burn immunity. And then with that, basically, you're good, you're golden. We have Hulkling, which is completely power burn immune. So he's going to be basically an auto ban alongside Galen, I believe, given how strong of an attacker and defender he is. We have Venom and Venompool, both of whom are power burn immune against tech champions, and in case of Venom, you also have access to easy armor break on heavy attack, so you will be able to use him against majority non-tech champions too. And then there is that Om-Nom on level 1 in order to recover some damage and potentially use it to nullify some armor buffs. And then Venompool obviously kind of famously does like that armor up on level 1, which also gives him regen in order for you to recover some potential power burn. So both of these champions are flat out power burn immune against tech champions, but even against non-tech champions, they do have some options. So I do think that we are going to see some Venoms and Venompools floating around, especially given the fact that Venom himself can proc armor ups just casually by himself, so he can also potentially be, somewhat decent of a defender. So we have Galen, which I mentioned before. We have King Groot, which I think we will see, as he is one of the more known defensive tank champions, as well as obviously he is immune against power manipulation, and he will be decently, effective offensively, especially also because he does have access to permanent armor breaks on his level 1. Then we have Red Goblin, who is again flat out immune against armor breaks, would work well, especially well against spider characters. We have Annihilus, as long as his Cosmic Rod remains intact, he's fully power burn immune as well, so I do expect a lot of people rushing to rank 3 their Annihilus, obviously, because Annihilus can be potentially defensively annoying too. And we have Terrax. Here we need to add in his power burn immune against metal opponents. And obviously, that means that he will have some more offensive uses as well. Not to mention the fact that he has easy access to armor breaks, and that can help him even in some non-metal situations and matchups, I would suspect. That being said, we need to move on to more common armor break characters. Now, if you do have a rank 4 Corvus, I can potentially see him being useful if you happen to run Liquid Courage Double Edge. Without it, I still probably would not recommend running Corvus. But we do have Medusa, obviously very easy armor breaks and somewhat decent defense. Then we have Vision Arcus. Vision Arcus is actually going to be, in my opinion, one of the kind of bigger surprise characters, because obviously not only he has access to armor breaks without contact and then armor shatter, which prevents future armor breaks, also against champions that will start with armor up buff, he's going to be an excellent choice because he does take 80% reduced power burn damage, and with that, every time he would have his power reduced, he gains more power, charges his power gains. So against champions that start with armor ups, you will probably be able to ramp him up extremely quickly, get up to your 3-4 power gain buffs, and therefore have him be more effective attacker, and then quite quickly shut down all potential future armor ups. So I do expect him to perform quite well. He, just like Annihilus and potentially Terrax, I expect people to be kind of like ranking up in quite short order. Then we have Silver Surfer, obviously quite easy armor breaks on his heavy. Now, Silver Surfer might be a bit troublesome to use because you do need to time everything correctly because he's not armor, power burn immune, but he does have access to those fairly constant armor breaks, and especially given the fact that you can just throw that heavy attack from distance without necessarily needing to make contact. If you play around well enough, I do think Silver Surfer is going to be quite formidable attacker. Then we have Captain Marvel movie, which could potentially make some sort of a return. I expect OG Thor to be quite potentially popular character in the next meta. Howard the Duck is going to be quite good, I think, as well as an all-around champion, because obviously Howard the Duck is not only one of the few really good domino counters, which we will need in this meta for sure. He also has armor breaks on heavy that are extremely easily to access, and he starts the fight with multiple armor ups, so he can potentially be also somewhat of an annoying defender. So I personally already have rank 3 my Howard the Duck for the upcoming meta. Then we also have Sentinel and Yondu, because Sentinel, you basically have a ton of armor breaks on your level 1, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be viable enough to keep running it, because level 2 is where the big damage is. And then we have Yondu, who can inflict armor breaks against bleed immune champions or just steal armor ups, so potentially we can see him, but that's not as likely. And then obviously we have the entire big subset of the Nullify and Neutralize and Fate Seal attackers, whom you obviously have Dr. Doom, Rintra Tiger, Wiccan, Clairvoyant, Hood, Scarlet Witch, Sigil Witch, Sim Supreme, Sorcerer Supreme, Diablo, Juggernaut, and there will be more. Of whom most important, I believe, obviously, is going to be Rintra, Tiger, and Wiccan as the Nullify characters, being able to bypass that Nullify immunity and prevent these armor ups appearing, all together. But again, these champions will struggle against other champions who will start with armor ups, so there will be somewhat of a limited use for them. But again, Sigil Witch I think is going to be extremely powerful. Scarlet Witch could be potentially very good. Diablo and Juggernaut I expect to be kind of MVPs. And then we also will have these other champions that I do think will work extremely well. So you can start with Valkyrie, because you can basically only hit opponents' block and finish fights in a reasonable speed, and with that obviously they will not be power burning you as you're not striking them directly. Then we have Magneto, especially with Pacify, but even without the Pacify mastery, when you're going to be using Magneto, you're going to have 70% chance against metal champions to fail to give them the Chitin charge if they do not have an armor up already, and then you will also have 70% chance to fail that power burn from the node itself. So there's kind of like, again, this double RNG that you can go through if opponent doesn't start with an armor buff. But, obviously it's best with Pacify. Then we have Falcon with 100% defensive ability accuracy reduction, so you can be able to use him against virtually anybody that you can use Falcon against, and normally. Then we have Crossbones, if you can keep up with the Furies. We have also Massacre, which is basically similar as Valkyrie, because if your bat is ignited, opponent's defensive ability accuracy is reduced by 50% as well. He has access to Disorient, so I do expect Massacre to perform quite well in the upcoming meta. And then we're going to have Kitty Pryde, where in this case, if opponent starts with armor up, you just need to parry 3 times, and then you can start dashing, and you're going to be fine. And then we have Namor, which actually sounds like a really, really, really good champion for the next meta, because you can just ramp him in against an armor up character, and the more armor ups, the better for you, basically, because the more damage you will be reflecting. So that could be quite interesting there. And then we have some notable mentions here as science champions, because if you can notice, that out of all the classes mentioned here, we do have quite big presence of cosmic characters, as mainly the cosmic characters, or virtually all the cosmic characters, are the ones that are power burn immune. Then we have big presence obviously with the Nullify and Neutralize in Mystic class, and then we have some other things scattered here and there. We have some tech champions in form of Howard the Duck, and some others. We have more cosmics. Then we have some mutant in Magneto and Kitty Pryde and Namor. We have skill in Crossbones, Massacre, and Valkyrie. I do think Kingpin is going to be functionally quite viable, because you can just parry heavy till you're level 1 if opponent doesn't start with an armor buff, and then his ability accuracy reduction can work out solidly enough as well. But we don't really have science attackers, because science has nothing against armor breaks in general. If you take a look at science champions in Aunt May, you're going to notice that there's just almost no armor break to be seen, right? Captain America Infinity War only with synergy, so that's not a viable option. So where's an armor break? Where's an armor break? There's no armor breaks, right? There's no armor break here, no armor break there. Science don't do armor break. Science also is not a nullify class in itself, and let alone power burn immune. There are no Science power burn immune champions. And this is like the worrisome bit, which we're going to see probably as the meta plays out, because there's very little that restricts Mystic champions running rampant. So, like, what do you do when opponent drops a Man-Thing or a Sasquatch or a Mephisto in these conditions where you are basically unable to run any meaningful amount of Science champions? Therefore, we will have to try and make do with, you know, the best we can with what we have, in a sense, when it comes to Science class. And when it comes to Science class, there are 3 champions that actually have a potential chance of being able to do some of these. And with that, number 1, we're going to start with Titania, because obviously Titania is a very solid Science champion that you can bring in against majority of these Mystics. And with her, again, you're just going to have to pay attention to these Mystics, because most of the Mystic champions would be very dangerous in defense as by themselves, but they luckily do not start with an armor up buff. And that means you will have time to place that stagger, and you're just going to have to kind of pace yourself a bit, time yourself a bit, and you can stagger them with your heavy attack for 8 seconds. And if you are launching a Haymaker, it can place 2 staggers, but 1 will be enough to get rid of that armor up. So we're going to definitely see, I think, Titania shine in the upcoming meta, as she's one of the very few Science champions that actually will be playable. Then we are, I also believe, going to see Anti-Venom shine, because just like Titania, Anti-Venom does have a stagger on his heavy attack, which is even slightly longer, which lasts 10 seconds, and you can quite easily incorporate that in his base rotation. So, and then obviously he does have access to Petrify and whatnot, as well as his genetic memory debuffs in order to deal with these Mystic champions, because you can Spectre them, you can deaccelerate them. Not going to be the fastest, but it's going to be, you know, basically the best that we can do in a sense. And then we also have, well, we obviously do have Quake, but obviously Quake in most instances a 5-star is just not fast enough these days. But we do have Mr. Fantastic with his level 1 being able to place a stagger debuff for 9 seconds. So again, with Mr. Fantastic, it might be a bit trickier because you will struggle in a sense to get to your level 2 and then also have a level 1 ready as needed. But, you know, you're going to, again, have to pace yourself. You're going to have to dance around. And I'm sure that there will be a way to make Mr. Fantastic work. It's not going to be the fastest fights, but, you know, it's going to be better than having no counter at all to Mystic champions, such as that. So I do believe that overall, these 3 Science champions are going to play quite a quintessential role in upcoming meta, as well as I do think we are going to see Human Torch. But that has nothing to do with compatibility with the nodes, because against Mystic champions, like with Human Torch, what you will end up doing most likely is you're just going to start the fight with like 5-10 parries to build up your temperature and smolders, and then try and finish the fight in basically as close to 10 hits as possible in order not to take much power burn damage. So if you're going to basically, you know, do a bunch of parries, tap them once, do a bunch of parries, tap them once, I do think Human Torch will work well enough for him to be worth running, in a sense. And there we go. So I do think that these are going to be kind of like the more important offensive champions at a whole. And obviously, ideally, we will be looking at champions that can work the best as attackers and defenders, as I always do. So obviously, you know, Hulkling, Galen are going to be no-brainers. We're going to have Annihilus, King Groot, Terex probably in most of the decks. Venom or Venom Pool, I think, are going to be kind of convenient enough. I think Vision Arcus is going to be extremely important champion, potentially. Thor and Howard the Duck are going to shine. Then obviously we're going to have our kind of like Mystic base setup of Dr. Doom, Rintrah Tiger, and Wiccan. We're probably going to, you know, add in 1 or 2 extra Mystic attackers, because they will be exceptionally good at dealing with majority of the, you know, champions that opponents place. Also, I do not think we're going to see too many Science defenders, so that is going to speak well for Mystic attackers. And then obviously we have Neymar and Kitty Pryde that I think are going to function extremely well. Magneto is probably going to be a mainstay, same as Falcon, probably Valkyrie, and most of these science champions. So that is it for this video. I do have also kind of like a list of defenders to go through and explain why I think those defenders are going to be functioning the best. But again, as I said, these are going to be primary attackers or offensive options that are worth looking into. Obviously, all of this at the moment is speculation because the meta has not started, you know. Not all of these champions are going to be widely used. I do suspect that most of the MVPs that we will see are on this list. I might have missed out one or two, but this is more or less the direction of the champions that you could or should be looking in my opinion. And again, huge thank you to MFAR who sent to me the initial version of this list. Obviously, I did alter it and augment it a bit. I added some things to it, but it was a very good base to start making this video for. And that being said, yeah, I do hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button, hit that sub button, and hit all the good buttons. And I'm going to be back with a defensive champions list in a sense. And yeah, I'll catch you guys later. See ya. Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about